Hello everyone, Burb here. Cygames loves releasing all their double banners on my vacations, and today is no different, so unfortunately King Halo will be a day late, but today we are talking about Nice Nature Cheerleader. If you're new to this series I like to go and talk about the newly released characters and try to gather as much information as I can find on the internet and from various databases and put it all into a singular video for reference now and for later. It's probably a little too much detail than necessary, but that's why I call it a way too in-depth guide. So today I will talk about the banner briefly, and then we will talk about Nice Nature herself as a character. So, if you are an Oshi player for Nice Nature, this is your ace Nice Nature. If you don't really need much validation from me, this is the character to pull if you enjoy running Nice Nature as an ace herself. You can also run her as the Dominator debuffer role if you prefer to keep her as support, but the current Nice Nature that we get for free is a stamina debuffer tried and true. You can run the original one as ace, but this one has a lot more tools in the toolkit to work for. So if you want to run her as ace, this is the one to pull for. Also, if you want to run her as a modern updated debuffer, the Dominator debuffers will slowly get stronger over time, rather than the stamina debuffers pretty much at this point not really doing too much. This is also a double banner, so if you do enjoy King Halo Cheerleader, or you are looking for a semi fringe meta character on a couple of sprint tracks and mile tracks, um, you will get extra value on this banner itself because your pity will not just be wasted, it will be used to go towards the other character if you happen to pull this character late if this is your target. So imagine you go to 170, you're like, hey, well at this point I might as well do the 30 pulls to try to get and pity the King Halo at this point. Or if you pull King Halo during the banner, you can pity this character and not feel as bad. So double banners have additional value. That's enough yapping about the banner itself. Let's talk about Nice Nature. Nice Nature. Her aptitude, she's a medium long horse. By technicality, you can go and stretch her into the mile pretty easily with only 2 sparks. Mile C also means in Track Blazer you can run the mile medium long triple crown route or the mile medium plus Arima Keenan triple TR route and be just fine. You may want to go and bump that to mile B if you're doing that. However, her strategy, she is a late surger, but honestly, she has some value as a pace chaser as well and as an end closer, and you can stretch into those roles fairly easily with pace B and end D. So she's pretty flexible. You can force her in front for front F, and then she's a little tough to get sprint or dirt, so I wouldn't bother too much with that. But pretty flexible horse in 3 roles in particular with actual reasons to play her on each of those roles. Her stat bonuses for this version of Nice Nature is 10% stamina, 10% power, and 10% wit. You can try this. You can just run standard, power sparks and just go speed wit deck. On Track Blazer, I've having been a lot of success on these characters with power and stamina bonus, running speed sparks of all things and just going heavy power and heavy wit. Okay, so you can try it if you like. I've been having a lot of success on certain characters with that. So what it basically comes down to is that you're putting stats sparks in your weakest stat roll so that they have the most amount of value, and then you are pressing the buttons that amplify themselves, like the power button and the wit button in this case. So on longer and medium tracks, you're going to need stamina sparks for sure. You may even have to run a stamina card. However, if you are able to, at least try to run some speed sparks, just enough to supplement, and then perhaps do a 2-2-2 deck rather than, or even a 1-3-2 deck or 1-2-3 deck, something that goes and is a little bit lighter on speed than you are used to. You will find great success in the stat department because of how well these stat bonuses go and amplify the power and wit buttons in particular. Her ultimate go-go goal, which is different than Go-Go Moon, of course, is if the user passes another runner on the final corner or later, increase velocity from the mid-pack onward on the final straight. If the user isn't one of the top favorites, must have resolved to keep steadily increasing velocity. If you looked here at all the conditions, there's a lot of conditions. It's a lot more simple than you think. We will break these down. There's a precondition, which means we have to satisfy this in order to proc the condition itself. So the precondition must be satisfied, else the condition will never occur. The precondition is on the final corner, are you able to pass somebody? So the final corner is anywhere on the last corner of the racetrack till the end of the race, okay? At any point on this time, if we change order 1 time less than 0, which means we are passing somebody, come on. I spent way too long in that animation. If you pass somebody, you satisfy the precondition and you are ready for the condition itself. The condition is that it procs on the final straight, and this has been something that Cygames has been implementing a lot recently. Basically, these final corner ultimates have problems on specifically short or medium tracks that the final corner is too close to the acceleration zone start, that it gets eaten by the acceleration zone at least partially. So what they've been doing is that they've been preconditioning their passing on final corner or later and causing your C4 bomb to instead go and proc on the final straight, so it always gets full value. The condition itself is that on this final straight, or the last straight or later technically, but almost every map I think has a final straight that is the last part of the race. The order rate has to be between 40 and 70%, which means for champions meeting, you need to be between 4th and 6th place. And you can be anywhere from 4th, 5th, or 6th place, anywhere in between these two thresholds in champions meeting. Obviously, for League of Heroes, it will change slightly. But it's a fairly good mid-pack position to be in on the final straight, and it can be built around pretty easily. Notably, this condition will proc if the precondition is satisfied if you pass into it at any point, because it will satisfy the precondition, because this is on the final corner or later. On the final corner or later, you have passed somebody, and you've officially passed into the condition, which is the order rate 40 through 70 or 4 through 6. So if you pass into into 6, it will trigger, and if you get passed into 4th when you already passed somebody by going up into the forward pack, if the precondition is satisfied and you get passed, it acts as a sort of a pass protect, and that it gives you that speed at the end. The last condition determines the strength of the ultimate, which is essentially the long shot condition. Is if the game has given you 4th favorite or worse, which is somewhat controllable, but you don't really want to build for it because you generally want to build good Umas. You do get a bonus 1 second, which is somewhat significant, but not necessarily the most important thing to build on this character. 5 seconds is usually just fine. 6 seconds is a bonus. If only there was another character that had a 6 second 0.25 ultimate. I don't know. But to compare it to Oguri Cap, unfortunately, it's still weaker than Tripulse, but again, Tripulse is one of the most effective late race ultimates in the game, and also it is 2nd through 5th, and also it is 200 meters, and this is final straight, which means on long tracks, this ultimate will not get clipped by the end of the race. It will have full value, or Tripulse on Oguri Cap herself does get clipped, and you loses some minor amount of value because of the skill gets stretched. Now, it's still 2.1 versus 2.25 distance units, which means it's only about a little over 10% worse when you have the long shot modifier, and if you don't have the long shot modifier, you're about 30% worse, but it's still a perfectly serviceable ultimate that is a lot easier to proc than base Nice Natures in 3rd place at 200 meters or less, or whatever it is. So quite a good ultimate in my personal opinion, but again, I come from a background of a character that also has a 0.356 second ultimate that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Her inherit, unfortunately, is just a 0.15, and this is, again, another thing that they've been doing, is that a lot of the ultimates that are really good on running her as an ace just don't inherit very well. You do get the little bonus that if the long shot condition does get moved over to the child horse. However, that is only a 0.6 second increase for a 0.54, so you are about 30% worse and about 35 to 40% worse on the inherit itself. That being said, if you get a high amount of hints, this is just a white skill. It will be 120 instead of like 100, but hypothetically, if you get a 3-star green, it might be worth picking this ultimate up because it does technically have white skill plus upside onto it. Her career. I'm going to grab a drink of water real quick. I don't really have a way to mute the mic, so apologies for that. Her career. It's the same one as regular Nice Nature, I believe, but it's just 3rd place Kakukusho and nothing really else of note. By the end of the Reimakinen, you should have enough stamina. It's a little difficult if you're building her mile to hit 3rd place in the Kakukusho. Otherwise, standard medium-long career, and because she is Team Canopus, you don't necessarily have to win very many races, so it's pretty new player friendly. Now, if you decide to add the Kyoto Shunbo High and the Naruo Kinen to the Kokura Keenan that she runs in her race, you do get 25 speed, 25 stamina, and 2 hints for Homestretch Haste, which is really nice because Homestretch Haste is, we're finding out, quite a good late race closer skill, especially for late surges and end closers, right? If you end up getting third place, you actually, the first time I believe you get it, any non-objective race that you hit third place in exactly, you get some bonus stats that kind of just make it the same as winning in that case, because you get 65 skill points and 3 random stats. So it's just kind of a funny thing that can happen. All these are disabled in Track Blazer because they are secret events. Finally, you do have the rival races against Tokai Teo. You can run the Satsuki Show and the Japanese Derby in addition to your Kikuka Show, and whenever you do that, you do get some bonus stats and skill points for beating Tokai Teo, and even if you lose, you get standard race reward stats of +5 and plus 0.35 skill points. So those are her secret events. Her actual cheerleader events are pretty good. You get Fighter, which Fighter is interesting because as we are learning more about Shrewd Step, hypothetically, Fighter shouldn't be that far behind, but I'm still testing it, and I do not think it is a pickup right now, but it's very cheap when you have a lot of hints. Fearless is a new late surger skill that's very interesting in that it goes and is an acceleration skill that is 50% or later. So if you're gambling on Radiant Star, this is essentially the same gamble in that it's just a 1 in 6 to hit the Excel zone, and also it's just a white skill. So Fearless is a white speed skill with a tiny bit of acceleration up that can 1 in 6 because it's 50% or later, so that acceleration zone's roughly 17 to 20% of the late race, depending on the track. And then your Cheers, she is a practice perfect horse, which is okay. It's not as good as Charming, but it is there. Whirlwind Advice is the Nice Nature character event that will give Studious. Studious was more meant for when she was trying to hit people with all-seeing eyes. Without that, Studious is pretty much a not take either. For event skills, we've talked about her event skills, so let's talk about her regular skills. Her regular skills, Long Shot and Late Surger Savvy are in kit. Notably, you will basically, if you're not reading the pre-lobby, if Long Shot procs, her ultimate will have the additional value. If not, it will not. Late Surger Savvy is decent. It's just some bonus wit and vision as well. I would take Late Surger Savvy over Studious because they both give vision. But Take the Chance is the new, quote unquote, a little bit new from the brink, is the gold version of it. Acceleration skill for late surges, and it trades essentially one being medium locked instead of late surger locked for 33% of its value. It's only 1.2 seconds rather than 1.8 seconds. Yes, 1.8 seconds for on your left or slick surge. And it also works in 5th place, so it has a little bit better positional advantage over on your left, but is not as potent, so it's sort of a 50-50 on whether you take this depending on how much mid-race you end up getting, okay? So Take the Chance is normally a decent skill to pick up as a backup acceleration option. It's also not locked to Late Surger, like I said, so you can run this in End Closer, as well as technically Pace Chaser, but you shouldn't be in 5th place as a Pace Chaser. Her golds are quite good. Dominator, very good if you are building specifically a Dominator support debuffer to help your other horses. And then No Stopping Me is one of the most premier accelerations in the game. After the No Stopping Me rework, it basically procs whenever there is a horse in the left or right lane of you. And that happens fairly consistently in terms of like above 50% on tracks that are not corner 4 or final straight tracks, which I will go into in the CM viability. In fact, the CM viability might be easier to understand these two skills. So what you are looking for in the CM viability is you are looking for a final straight that is far enough away from the spurt itself, so that the spurt has enough time for you to accelerate to max speed before the final straight, which is most mediums and most long tracks. Her ultimate will get value in terms of her speed that she gives. The other thing that you're looking for is the final corner very close to the final spurt or not, because the Umas tend to fan out and choose their final lanes after the final corner happens. In Taurus Cup, the problems that we're having with No Stopping Me is that it's kind of right in that weird threshold where it's good and kind of inconsistent at the same time, because you have this little bit of NSMing and then you fan out here, and it's unlikely to proc if you choose the wrong lane. So it's not reliable, but it's good enough usually to take in the Taurus Cup. And this character kind of lives on proccing no stopping me off of somebody, passing them on the final corner, and then being in the mid pack to hit the massive, speed bomb that she has on the final straight. And that is why I'm trying to say I don't think you should almost ever pick both of these skills up at the same time, in my opinion. Um, Reason being is that this character doesn't really thrive on sitting back in the back four positions, 6th, 7th, 8th, and ninth. She thrives by just fighting for the mid race incredibly, incredibly hard, getting into the pace chaser pack as a late surger or an end closer, and then NSMing off the pace chasers or end closers to then get into that, fourth place, and then getting her ultimate to close out the race. If you sit back too long, what's going to happen on these medium tracks that have short, specifically the ones that have short final straights, um, you're going to just hit and still be in like second and third place, and you're just not going to get beat the character that's hitting, angling, and scheming the front runner. So there's an argument, if you are throwing every hint book in the world on this character and have gotten no stopping me to max and have gotten Dominator to max, the Dominator is perfectly fine to pick up. It's technically efficient at that point. However, I think you just, if you're building her an ace, you grab no stopping me. If you're not building an ace, you're building a support, you pick Dominator. I don't think it's good to pick both at the same time because it's two conflicting ideologies. Anyways, like I said, NSM will work very well on tracks that don't have the final corner exactly or before the spurt itself, and then of course her ultimate needs to be far enough away from the excel zone. On Gemini Cup, like the miles and most of the mile tracks and most sprint tracks, but not all, you're going to have the problem where the NSM and her ultimate both are proccing too late. So if you look here, it's eaten by the excel zone, at least partially. It's still perfectly fine to run. And then NSM, you are choosing your lane at this point, so it's just complete RNG whether or not you choose a lane that has another Uma next to it, right? So if you choose lane 2 and there's 1 and 1, you can proc NSM off of them. If you choose lane 7 and there's no one near you, NSM is completely useless. But NSM really, really, really high rolls a lot. Cancer Cup is a good example of a very good track for this horse in particular, in that, hey, NSM is going to proc before the final corner, so you have a lot of distance in which you can NSN off people because they're still running on the corner before they're choosing their final lanes. And then when the final corner happens, they fan out. You hit the mid pack, you press Nice Nature Ultimate, and you go and try to win the game at that point. Her Affinity. Same as Nice Nature, she has a high affinity with John Umamusume, Special Week herself, as well as particularly useful one in Narita Brian, because it basically has the same condition that you want to pass somebody on the final corner, so you can do a massive C4 bomb with 8.25 plus your final straight skill based because you passed on it at that point. Also, Mambo's on Team Canopus. That's why she has very, very high affinity with her. And you go down, she has some decent affinities as you go along. You have Oguri Cap and Measure McQueen, as well as Gold Ship. So, in conclusion, this character can be built as a good Dominator debuffer. One of the premier ones, in fact, as well as a quite good ace. I really want to stress that if you're building aces, you probably shouldn't be putting Dominator on them if you're building them in the late surge or end closer position, because you need to fight for the mid race, especially on this character with no stopping me based in the kit. That is her win plan, is to NSM off the front of the pack. Otherwise, just in general, this character, yeah, she's pretty nice. Nature does. Alright, take care, Burbout.